Okay, everybody, thank you for taking the time to join me on this hot and humid and languid Sunday afternoon. I appreciate you putting in the effort to come and listen to me speak. My name is Paul Rain, and I am the founder or one of the founders of ZenGengo Academy and also the developer of the platform as well. Now, some of you may have heard of the original ZenGengo, which is like a set of tools for teachers to create their own lessons for students. ZenGengo Academy is a bit different. ZenGengo Academy is a pre-made content solution for language learners. And it's a digital lessons for global language learners. So basically, students can purchase an access card, and then they can study ZenGengo Academy. And there's hundreds of lessons already made. The teacher does not have to do anything other than help the students to log into the system on the first day, and then they can just monitor the students' progress. So ZenGengo Academy is a little bit different from the original ZenGengo that you may have heard of. Let me start by taking a few steps back. I'm going to start at the beginning here, the very beginning, okay? And ask the question, how long does it take to actually learn a language? Well, that's a very, very important and interesting question. The US Department of State obviously has looked into this question quite deeply and over a long period of time. And they have looked into the question of how long it takes English learners to learn other languages. And they basically separated languages into different categories, depending on how different or how similar the cultural and the linguistic factors are between English and the language the student is trying to learn. So in category 1, we have between 600 and 750 hours of intentional study required to reach a kind of high level of proficiency in these languages, such as French, Spanish, and Italian. Category 2, it increases to 900 hours. Category 3, we're looking at 1,100 hours. And category 3, importantly, has significant cultural and linguistic differences. So, you know, English and Greek, English and Russian, English and Thai, for example, they're very, very different culturally and linguistically. So it takes longer to obtain proficiency in those languages. Now, category 4, the US Department of State dubs as super hard. This is the technical term that they use. It's quite interesting. They call these languages super hard. And they include, quite interestingly for us, Japanese, Korean, Arabic, and other languages like that. So not only do they have significant cultural and linguistic differences, but they are classed at even one level higher than that, and they're classed as being super hard. And because they are so hard, they estimate that for an English speaker to become proficient in Japanese or Korean or Arabic, it takes at least 2,200 hours of intentional study. Okay, so that's all very interesting, but how does it tie into teachers of English working in Japan, for example? So that's what I want to talk about next. So what about Japanese learners of English? Now, the research here shows us that it takes approximately 2,500 hours for an average Japanese learner of English to obtain a good level of proficiency in English. Okay, so if we think that the typical Japanese student starts learning English at the age of 10, and I think the government recently reduced the mandatory age, so students have to start learning English in school from a younger age. I think from 2020, they reduced it even further, but let's say they start learning from the age of 10, and they continue their education until graduation from college at the age of 22. That gives us 12 years of formal education. So let's say that 2,500 hours is spread out over 12 years of formal education. That works out to be 200 hours, 208 to be precise, hours per year, or 4 hours per week. So boiling all this research down, the implication and the upshot for Japanese learners of English is that they should be studying English for 4 hours a week, every week from the age of 12 to the age, sorry, from the age of 10 to the age of 22, 4 hours per week. Okay. Now, obviously, in those early years, they might not study as much. They might study more as a university student, or it could be the other way around. But either way, they have to hit that magic figure of 2,500 hours to stand a chance of becoming proficient in English. And if they want to acquire a native level, and I know that's a bit of a controversial word, but let's just say native-like level, or speaking, highly, highly proficiently, they're looking at about twice that, so about 5,000 hours, right? And those figures come from research conducted by Inagaki in 2005. So anyway, let's say that students need to study for at least 2,500 hours, Japanese learners of English. Okay, so we can acknowledge that, we can bear that 2,500 hours figure in mind, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge that there are other factors at play in how long it takes to learn a particular language. So, it's not just the number of hours that you put in, there are other factors. So these quotes come from research conducted by Lightbound and Spada, and they say that it has been observed countless times that in the same foreign language class, some students progress rapidly, others struggle along very slowly, and even in ideal conditions, some learners seem to make little progress in learning. And furthermore, they say, 1 or 2 hours a week will not produce advanced second language speakers, no matter how young they were when they began. Well, we, with that 2,500 hours, have posited 4 hours a week, at least 4 hours a week. So yes, this claim by Lightbound and Spada that 2 hours per week is not enough seems to hold water. Now, there are other factors, of course, that affect how quickly we can learn a language, things such as intelligence. There are claims of different students having different aptitudes in learning languages, different learning styles, personality, motivation, attitudes, identity, ethnic group, and affiliation. Again, we were looking at how two languages and cultures that are very distant from each other, it takes much more effort and time and ability to cross that divide and to learn the language effectively. We also have things such as learner beliefs, and we have the age of acquisition as well. So all of those things we should bear in mind, along with that 2,500 hour ballpark figure for obtaining kind of some level of proficiency in a foreign language. Now, so thinking about, again, that 2,500 hours, how much of that should actually be spent on deliberate learning? Now, I'm a big fan of Paul Nation, and I hope many of you will agree with me that he has some very valuable and important ideas about language teaching and language learning. And he basically proposes this framework, which he calls the 4 strands. And the 4 strands consists of comprehensible input, meaningful output, focus on fluency, and also this kind of deliberate learning strand, or focus on form. And he basically argues that this should comprise 25% of the total time that the student spends formally learning a language. Okay, so we'd be looking at we're looking at 625 hours. Okay, of that 2,500 should be spent on deliberately learning the language. So this deliberate learning is also known as focus on form, form-focused instruction, deliberate study, or intentional learning. All of those phrases basically refer to the same thing, which is the student deliberately, intentionally trying to learn vocabulary, trying to learn pronunciation, trying to learn grammar. All of that is done deliberately. Okay, 625 hours. So digging down further into that deliberate learning part of the 2,500 hours, the 625 hours, what kind of deliberate learning should be done? So there are obviously more effective and less effective activities the student can be doing. People tend to agree in this day and age that just doing, for example, grammar translation activities is not a good use of time. I mean, if that's all the student does, that's not the best form of deliberate learning, although it may have a role to play. But these are the kinds of deliberate learning that Paul Nation recommends that the students should do. So one of them is to learn vocabulary, both in and out of context. So I'll read this quote from Nation's 2014 paper. It is important that there is vocabulary learning in context through meaning-focused input and meaning-focused output and fluency development. But it is also important that there is deliberate decontextualized learning. So this is like kind of the flashcard situation where you've got the English on one side and the Japanese on the other side. That's kind of decontextualized vocabulary learning. But at the same time as that, you need to be able to learn the vocabulary in context so you can see how those words connect to and relate to other words in the same sentence, in the same paragraph, and overall in the entire passage. The next deliberate learning activity Nation recommends is transcription. So again, I'll read the quote here. This deliberate learning activity improves listening skills and provides useful feedback on word and phrase recognition. So the student is listening to a passage, listening to a recording of some kind of target language, and they're writing or they're typing what they hear. And this is a useful activity to improve listening skills and to get feedback on word and phrase recognition. The next activity is intensive reading, and this should be contrasted with extensive reading. Extensive reading in Japanese, sometimes known as tadoku, is reading, tens or hundreds of books over the course of a semester. And those books are generally at a lower level of English than the student's current level. The student would be expected to know between 95 and 98% of the words appearing in those books. And they should be reading for enjoyment, not because they feel they have to read. So in contrast to that, we have intensive reading. Intensive reading involves working your way slowly and carefully through a text with the help of a dictionary. So students are not expected to have such a high knowledge or a high percentage of words in the text. There may be 5 or 10 or a handful of words in the text that they don't know, they haven't encountered before. They could be brand new words or words that they're not familiar with. Okay. And finally, obviously Nation recommends more activities than this, but these are the 4 that I'm going to talk about in this presentation. We have pronunciation practice. Difficult sounds need to be practiced in the most common words that they appear in, and should also be practiced in phrases and short sentences. That's very important. So they should be practiced in sentences. So bear that in mind as we come to the demonstration section in the next part of my presentation. Okay, so vocabulary study, transcription, intensive reading, pronunciation practice. We have that 2,500 hours of study in total, of which 625 should probably be deliberate learning. Okay. So if we said 4 hours a week in total, then deliberate learning would be 1 hour a week. So students should be getting at least 1 hour a week of deliberate learning. Now coming on to the question of what kind of English students should learn. This might sound like a bit of a strange question. Like, what do you mean that there's just one kind of English, isn't there? No, these days we live in a world where English is a global language, and non-native speakers of English actually outnumber native speakers approximately 2 to 1, almost 3 to 1, depending on the research that you read about this, but at least 2 to 1. English has become the world's de facto lingua franca through a combination of historical accidents and kind of being in the right place at the right time, the British Empire and the influence of America as the sole world superpower. English has become this kind of de facto lingua franca, and it's used by people to communicate with each other whose first languages are not English. And neither of them share a language, neither of them share a first language, so they use English as a lingua franca. So following on from that, Japanese learners of English are quite likely to use the language to communicate with other non-native speakers of the language. So we should bear that in mind when we are teaching them English. Learners should be exposed to a variety of accents, and their own accent should not necessarily be held to native speaker norms. Now, this is quite a controversial and debatable and kind of argumentative claim here. But what I'm saying is it shouldn't necessarily be held to native speaker norms. If the student wants to target, American English or British English, and they want to acquire that kind of accent, that's fine for them to do that. But if they just want to be comprehensible in their speech, it's not necessarily important to focus on doing that. And following on from that, then, the emphasis should be on mutual intelligibility. So it's very important to have this kind of mutual intelligibility, that people using English as a lingua franca can understand each other, even if they don't speak exactly like native speakers do. That's okay. Okay, 15 minutes to go. So here comes the kind of the sale. Okay, this is a commercial presentation. So introducing ZenGengo Academy. This is the new content solution that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation. Okay, and it has several benefits that we believe these are benefits. It has vocabulary in context. So ZenGengo Academy users don't learn words just in isolation, but they also learn them as in context, okay, in the context of a passage. It also has global Englishes. So we use a variety of different accents when we deliver the content to learners. It's rich in media, and it also has formative feedback, so students can see how well they're doing as they progress through the course. It has insights for teachers, so we have detailed reports that give teachers heads up on who's progressing, who's falling behind. You know, so when we come back to this statement by Lightdown and Spada, that some students progress quickly, others more slowly. ZenGengo Academy will help you identify those students who are progressing more slowly and perhaps single them out for further instructional intervention. It's also several levels, so we're able to offer a certain level of text to match the approximate CEFA level of the students. Currently, we offer kind of in the range of A2 to B1, which tends to be where a lot of Japanese university freshmen tend to fall into that kind of range of ability there. So I'd like to show you guys in the last 15 minutes an actual demonstration of the activities that are contained within ZenGengo Academy. I'm just going to go ahead and click on this link here. Okay, so here we have 5 activities, and by the way, these work in all browsers. It's a web-based solution, so it works in all browsers, on all devices, mobile phones, tablets, smartphones, etc. There's no app to download. It's just students visit a particular web address, and the content is loaded into their browser. So what the students will do, they'll start off by listening to and watching a video about the topic. So this is what they start off, the first activity that they do. Let me just share my sound here. Just at this point, do we have any questions? Sorry, I noticed in the chat there was a few questions. From Trina, maybe.
Yeah, sorry, I just shared some of my videos covering some topics that you'd mentioned.
Thank you. Thanks, Trina.
Using your plug to plug my channel.
Okay. Okay, cool. All right. So, so this is what the students will start off by doing. They will, first of all, they will watch the video.
Every spring across many parts of Asia, beautiful pink and white blossoms begin to appear on cherry trees. It's a time for people to go outside and spend time in nature.
So in this example, the speaker happens to be speaking an American English accent, but we have other examples that are kind of different global accents, so the students can be exposed to these different ways of speaking English. So the first thing the student has to do is to rate the level of their understanding of this video. So they can just slide this slider up or down, and the teacher can get an immediate understanding of their students' understanding of the content. Yeah. Okay, and they go ahead and submit the assignment, and that goes onto the next activity then here. So the next activity, students will be doing this kind of intensive reading and also reading while listening. This is what Nation refers to as a linked skill, because you're using the same content, but you're doing a listening version of it, and you're also doing a reading version. And we do the listening and reading at the same time. So the students can really benefit from that kind of dual input.
Every spring across many parts of Asia, beautiful pink and white blossoms begin to appear on cherry trees. It's a time for people to go outside and spend time in nature.
So after they finish listening and reading to the text, they can go to the next page. And this is where we get the vocabulary in context section. So this is, again, Nation's claim here that it's important to learn vocabulary in context and also out of context. And here we have this ability for students to just put their mouse over the word and see the translation. Or if they're on a smartphone, they just click their word and they see the translation of the word. Or in this case, it's actually an English definition of an English word here. Okay. So once they've studied these words and they're confident they know the meanings of the words, then we go on to the kind of decontextualized section. So deliberate decontextualized learning here. The students can match the definition to the words that are given below here. So divide into parts, that would be share, information about what you think will happen in the future, forecast. Two people who are married, that would be couple. Okay, and I'll just skip through the remaining questions here. Okay, and then we have this kind of grammar section where students are trying to figure out the correct order of these kind of grammatical chunks of English. So in Japan, there is a tradition of cherry blossoms in spring, viewing cherry blossoms in spring. Okay, so this is just kind of a grammatical check. The students understand the grammar in the sentences here. Let me just go through to the end of this section. Okay, submit that assignment. Okay, so I've done 2 parts of the assignment now. Okay, what I'm going to do is go to this activity, which is the transcription. Again, the nation recommends this as a way to improve listening skills and also work on word and phrase recognition. So it's the same text every time, by the way. It's that passage about cherry blossoms. The text doesn't change between every activity type, so students can slowly start to understand the text and remember the words in the text.
Every spring across many parts of Asia, beautiful pink and white blossoms begin to appear on cherry trees.
Oops. Okay, and they just have to listen and transcribe. And by the way, they can also, if they want to, slow the audio down or even speed it up if they want to. So we can go down to 0.75 speed on this.
It's a time for people to go outside and spend time in nature.
So it's an amazing way. Like, imagine if a student asks you, excuse me, could you speak 0.75 times slower? It's like, well, no, I can't do that. But this system can. And it's very kind of, it's like having, the student has their own personalized teacher that they can control. They can control the speed of the audio themselves and listen to it as many times as they want.
It's a time for people to go outside and spend time in nature.
Okay, so let me just skip through the rest of these questions. And again, we said, obviously ZenGengo has this formative feedback. At the end of every activity, students will see the score and they'll see the answers they got correct and the ones they got wrong. And there's no need for teachers to mark this manually or anything like that. It's all done by the ZenGengo system. Okay, now we have 2 activities remaining. The next one is a speaking activity. Now what we're doing here is we're doing something called elicited imitation. Elicited imitation has been shown in the research to actually require students to process the grammar in the sentences. They can't just parrot the sentence. So obviously drilling, audio drilling is effective to some extent. If that's all students do, it's no good, but it can be part of an overall course of language learning. But what we like to do is take that to one step further and go to elicited imitation. So students have to listen to the audio and then try to memorize the audio. In doing that, they have to process the grammar and then they repeat the audio. So I'll give an example here.
Every spring, beautiful pink and white blossoms begin to appear on cherry trees.
Let me just go to normal speed here.
Every spring, beautiful pink and white blossoms begin to appear on cherry trees.
Every spring, beautiful blossoms begin to appear on cherry trees. So I intentionally made a mistake there, and let's see if it picks up my mistake. Yes, you see, every spring, beautiful blossoms. So I missed out pink and white. So again, yeah, this is a good way to get students to really memorize and really process these lexical phrases and chunks of English. So I can try this again now. Now I know the answer, I can try it again. Every spring, beautiful pink and white blossoms begin to appear on cherry trees. Every spring, beautiful pink and white blossoms begin to appear on cherry trees. Okay, this time I was able to read and I got 100% correct answer. Okay, so that is our pronunciation. Well, I guess it's pronunciation, but it's also grammar memorization and fluency building. They're pronouncing the words well enough for the computer to recognize what they're saying, but again, they're also, memorizing and processing these grammatical chunks of English. Hey, let me just skip through these remaining questions. Okay, and we get the feedback at the end there. The student can see exactly how many words they got correct in each utterance, and they can see their overall score. And again, all of this goes into the teacher's dashboard. You can assign ZenGengo Academy as part of your overall course grade. And it's a kind of a set and forget. You don't have to worry about it. It's just there. It will work. There's no need to stress about it. You know students are going to do it, and you can say, look, 10% of your course grade comes from ZenGengo Academy. and then students will do it even more. They'll be even more motivated to study outside of class, okay? Now, finally, we have this comprehension check here where students are required to reorganize the passage into the correct order here. So again, this is to do with processing the grammar in the passage. So it's time for people to go outside and spend time in nature. Probably usually happens from the end of March to the beginning of May, okay? I can go on to the next question. Now this, we have some interesting activity of, we have a listening question and we also have listening answers. So again, it's helping students to really practice and really drill down on their listening skills here.
What does hanami mean? Cherry blossoms. Flower viewing. Pink and white flowers. Traditional parties. Cherry blossoms.
Okay, and here you can also hear that the accent has changed. We've gone from an American accent to an Australian accent. And again, we do have other videos and other audio that are kind of non-inner circle countries. They're kind of expanding circle, global English kind of accents that students can be exposed to. Okay, let me just skip through these last few questions here. And I get immediate feedback again on my submission. And that is it. Okay, so that's lesson is complete now. The student has done the lesson and they can come back and do another lesson the following week. Okay, now, obviously I whizzed through that really quickly, but it would take the student maybe 3 or 4 times longer than it took me to do this. So if they do a couple of lessons a week, I think they'll be looking at getting that extra hour that they need for the 2,500 divided by 4, 625 hours of intentional learning. 1 hour a week maybe of extra learning on top of the amazing and incredible lessons that you give them as university teachers. Okay, I have some references that I'm happy to share with you guys if you're interested in following up more on the research, on the numbers there. And I invite you to check out ZenGengo Academy in more detail. You can go to zengengo.com/academy. We're currently selling access cards for 900 yen per month, 900 yen for 6 months, or 1,800 yen for 12 months. So we think this is a really reasonable cost for students who may already be purchasing a textbook. I think this wouldn't break the bank for them to do ZenGengo Academy on top of the textbook they might already be buying for your course. And I think, if I'm correct, we have 3 minutes left. Himawari, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So I'd like to apologize for speaking so quickly and invite any questions there may be in the audience at this point.